She always called me nothing and didn't pay attention to me. At my sister's engagement party, I stood in the corner, unnoticed. Then her fiancé pulled out his cell phone and said, "Wait, why did the waiter tell me you owned the restaurant?" The whole room froze. I clutched my champagne glass to my chest, trying to blend in with the wall in the far corner of the banquet hall. The music, laughter, and clinking dishes blended into a monotonous hum that made the vein in my temple throb. The hall of the White Rose restaurant glittered with crystal chandeliers reflected in the silverware polished to a shine. I found it ironic that my sister Christina and her fiancé Daniel's engagement was being celebrated at a restaurant that was considered a major competitor to my own establishment. "Melanie, you could at least look a little more cheerful tonight," Mom hissed, suddenly appearing beside me. Her impeccably styled gray hair and perfectly pressed ivory dress screamed how important this evening was to her. "It's your sister's day." "I'm sorry, Mom. Just tired," I mumbled, taking a sip of champagne that seemed too sweet. "You're always tired, Melanie," she sighed. "You could at least make an effort today. You're 32 years old, and it's time you learned to enjoy the successes of others." The success of others. Like I wasn't capable of my own. It probably sounds awful, but at times like this, I couldn't help but picture my mother's face if she found out that her youngest daughter, who is still looking for herself, as Christina kept saying, owned a Michelin-starred restaurant. Across the room, I watched Christina, dazzling in her cream dress, charming a group of guests. Her laughter, loud, infectious, echoed through the crowd. Beside her, as if gravitationally drawn to her radiance, stood Daniel. Tall, with thick dark hair and a friendly smile, he seemed like the perfect match. A successful investment analyst, just made for my sister-in-law. "There's our Melanie!" Christina exclaimed when she spotted me and my mom. She swam over to us, dragging Daniel and a few other guests with her. "I was just telling you how you tried to bake a cake for my 21st birthday, and it fell apart on the table." I felt the color flood my cheeks, but I forced myself to smile. Christina told this story every chance she got, adding humiliating details each time. "I think that cake was chocolate?" Daniel asked, trying to be polite. "It was inedible. That's what it was," Christine laughed, and the guests echoed her. "You know, my sister always thought she was a great cook, but she ended up stuck as a waitress. Although," she leaned toward the group, as if sharing a secret, "I hear she's been promoted to assistant manager now. Right, Mel?" "Something like that," I mumbled, sipping more champagne. "This is my little sister," Christina continued, turning to the couple I didn't recognize. "She's still looking for herself." Her father appeared from the crowd and put his hand on Christina's shoulder. "You always knew exactly what you wanted, Princess." I noticed Marco, the waiter who worked at my restaurant on weekends, maneuvering between the guests with a tray of canapes. He winked at me discreetly, and I felt a surge of gratitude. At least someone here knew who I really was. "Miss Baxter." He leaned toward me, when the others were distracted by Christine's new anecdote. "The chef wants to know if we should serve the hot appetizers now, or wait another 20 minutes like you asked." "Let him wait," I replied quietly. "A lot of the guests haven't arrived yet." Daniel, who was standing closer than I thought, turned around with a surprised look on his face. "Wait, why did the waiter tell me you owned the restaurant?" His voice, louder than usual with surprise, made the people around him fall silent. It was as if time had stopped. I saw Christina's eyes widen, then narrow. Dad froze with his glass halfway to his mouth. Mom looked from me to the waiter in confusion. "What restaurant?" Christina asked with a fake laugh. "Daniel, you must have misheard." Marco, realizing his mistake, turned pale. "I'm sorry, I meant Seasons," Daniel said, snapping his fingers. "Dash, that new Michelin-starred restaurant on Oak Street. He called you the owner of Seasons." At that moment, I felt something in me change. Years of pretense, years of silent acceptance of being a loser. It was all beginning to crack like thin ice in the spring sun. Yes, I said, and my voice sounded more confident than I'd expected. I own Seasons. For 2 years now. What? Mom exhaled. But you said you worked at some cafe. Not a cafe, Mom. A restaurant. My restaurant. Christina looked like she'd been slapped. Is this some kind of joke? Her voice was ringing with tension. You can't own a restaurant. I mean, you're a worthless? I finally said the word she'd been calling me since I was a kid. Incompetent? Untalented? Loser? The guests around us shuffled awkwardly from foot to foot, trying to pretend they couldn't hear the family quarrel unfolding in the middle of the party. I've never, Christina started, but I interrupted her. You always, Chris. Always. Ever since I turned 5 and broke your favorite doll. You called me a jerk every chance you got. Even today, the day of your engagement, you couldn't help but humiliate me in front of everyone. Melanie, my father interjected, his voice sounding confused. Why did you hide from us that you owned a restaurant? I looked at him, then at my mom, whose face was a mixture of shock and disbelief. Would you have believed it? I asked quietly. If I came in and told you that I'd bought a restaurant, that I ran a staff of 20, that I'd gotten a Michelin star in my first year of business, would you believe it? Would you believe me? I could see the answer in their faces. No, they wouldn't have believed it. To them, I was always just Christina's little sister, the one who didn't live up to expectations. Daniel looked at me with unexpected respect and interest. Seasons is an amazing place. I was there for a company dinner last month. That dessert with lavender and honey. Daniel! Christina interrupted him abruptly. This is not the time to discuss any dessert. Lavender mousse with honey caramel and pear sorbet, I said automatically. Exactly! Daniel smiled at me. It was incredible. Christina, looking at the expression on her fiancé's face, turned even paler. I could see something in her eyes that I'd never seen in her eyes before. Fear. Fear that she was no longer the center of attention. Fear that someone might admire me instead of her. I don't understand. Mom was still shaking her head. Why did you keep this from us? We could have supported you, been happy for you. Couldn't we, Mom? I looked her straight in the eye. When I told you I wanted to go to culinary school instead of law school, you said I was throwing my life away on stupid hobbies. When I got my first job as a cook's helper, Dad said I could aspire to more like Christina. My parents exchanged guilty looks. In that moment, I felt the mask of submissiveness I had worn for so many years finally fall off my face. I was no longer my sister's shadow, unnoticed in the corner. I was Melanie Baxter, the chief and owner of Seasons. I think I should go, I said, setting my unfinished glass on the tray of a passing waiter. Congratulations on your engagement, Daniel. I headed for the exit, feeling the stares of everyone there. For the first time in my life, I wasn't embarrassed. My first distinct memory from childhood, me 5, Christina 8, an elementary school Christmas concert. Christina stands in the center of the stage in a shiny star costume, singing a solo, and her voice, piercingly clear, fills the entire auditorium. I sit in the third row of the choir, just one of many. After the performance, our parents rush over to Christina with hugs and praise, and I get an absent-minded, "You did good too, Melanie." In the Baxter home, success was measured by specific accomplishments. Robert and Helen, both high school teachers, he of math, she of literature, believed in objective measures, grades, awards, recognition. Christina fit perfectly into this system. By the age of 12, she had won 3 science Olympiads. By 15, she was captain of the debate club. By 18, she had won a scholarship to a prestigious university. You see, Melanie, my father said as he pinned Christina's diploma on our living room wall of fame. That's what it means to set a goal and achieve it. My wall was practically empty. One certificate of commendation for a cooking contest in middle school, a certificate of participation in an art exhibition. It's not that I wasn't trying, it's just that my interests lay in areas where success wasn't measured in numbers and cups. Mom, look! I, 10 years old, hold out to her a homemade card I made from dried flowers and watercolors. Mom takes a quick glance, smiles. Very nice, dear. But don't forget to study for your algebra test. Christina has been studying for 3 hours. When I was 13, I discovered cooking. It happened at Grandma Doris, my mom's mom, who lived in a small house on the outskirts of town. Visiting her on weekends, I escaped the constant comparison to my sister and immersed myself in a world of aromas, flavors, and textures. You have a natural talent, Melly, my grandmother would say, watching me intuitively mix spices for apple pie. You can sense food, and that's a rare gift. At home, I tried to recreate that sense of freedom by experimenting in the kitchen. Sometimes it worked well, sometimes it was disastrous. Geez, Melanie, you've moved groceries again, Mom sighed when another souffle experiment failed. Why don't you do something a little more reliable? Christine was already studying for the chemistry Olympiad when she was your age, Dad added, shaking his head. Maybe if Grandma Doris hadn't died of a stroke when I was 15, things would have turned out differently. She was the only one who believed in me unconditionally. After she died, the kitchen became my refuge and my battleground, where every failure confirmed my parents' view that it was just a hobby, not worthy of serious consideration. You need a real profession, Melanie, Mom said when I mentioned culinary school my senior year of high school. Cooks work in horrible conditions for pennies. You're too smart for that. Christina's already in her second year of law school, Dad reminded me. Why don't you follow in her footsteps? I ended up going into business as a compromise. I spent 4 years studying marketing and management, feeling increasingly alienated from my true passion. Christina had already graduated law school with honors and was dating the dean's son. Your eldest is so driven, their colleagues at university events told the parents. What's the younger one doing? Melanie is still searching for herself, my mom answered, with that special sigh I had learned to hate. After I graduated from college, I told my parents that I had gotten a job in the marketing department of a small company. It was a half-truth. I did get a job as an assistant cook at a small restaurant called Eleanor's 3 blocks from my rented apartment. The pay was low, the hours were insane, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I'd found my place. Eleanor Kelly, the owner and chef, was a short, energetic woman in her 50s, with a mop of red hair always tucked under her chef's hat. She had worked her way up from dishwasher to chef and owner of her own restaurant, and had no tolerance for laziness or incompetence. You cut onions like an art student, not a chef, she told me on my first day, taking the knife away. Dash, watch, and learn. I watched and learned. Every day, every shift. After 6 months, I could prepare all the vegetables for the evening shift in half the time. A year later, Eleanor trusted me to create the dessert menu. You have something you can't teach, she said one day when we were closing the restaurant after a particularly busy shift. Intuition, an understanding of the balance of flavors. Don't lose that. My parents thought I was still working in marketing and moonlighting as a waitress in the evenings. I didn't correct that misconception. Why? To hear again that I was throwing my life away, that I could aspire to more, like Christina, who by then was working at a prestigious law firm? Every family gathering turned into a celebration of Christina's successes, her promotions, her purchases, her relationships, and the questions for me were always the same. Are you still working at that cafe? Shouldn't you be looking for something more promising? In my 3rd year at Eleanor's, 2 life-changing events occurred. First, an influential restaurant critic published a rave review of my dessert menu, highlighting the innovative combination of traditional techniques and unexpected ingredients. This attracted new customers, and Eleanor promoted me to sous chef. Second, Eleanor was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which was rapidly progressing, making daily work in the kitchen increasingly painful. I'm too old for this shit, she told me over a glass of wine after closing time. The doctors say I need to slow down. You can't leave the restaurant, I objected. It's your life. Everything ends sometime, honey, she smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. I'm thinking of selling Eleanor's. The thought of the restaurant that had become my home falling into the wrong hands was unbearable. What if— I hesitated, but then I decided. What if I bought it? Eleanor laughed, but when she saw my serious face, she stopped talking. Honey, that's a lot of money. Where would you get it? I'll borrow it from the bank. I have a good credit history, and I have some savings for a down payment. My grandmother left me a small inheritance that I've never touched. Are you serious? Dash. Absolutely. The next 3 months were a chaos of meetings with bankers, lawyers, accountants. I was writing business plans, profit projections, development strategies. My university education finally came in handy. To my surprise, the bank approved the loan. My grandmother's inheritance, my savings, and the restaurant's good reputation played their part. On the day of signing the documents, Eleonora handed me her favorite chef's jacket. You're the chef now, she said. Don't disappoint me. I renamed the restaurant Seasons, updated the interior and menu, but kept the core team and Eleanor's philosophy. Seasonal ingredients, minimal waste, respect for produce. The first months were hell. I was working 18 hours a day, solving thousands of problems that I didn't even know existed when I was just a cook. All my parents knew was that I had changed jobs and was now running a small cafe. Every time my mom wondered if it was time for me to find something more suitable for a university graduate, I gave them vague answers. Why tell them the truth? To hear, "Oh, that's nice, honey. Christina just won a big case." A year after we opened Seasons, we got a Michelin star. It was practically a miracle for a new restaurant. I wanted to call my parents, tell them, scream into the phone, "Look! I've accomplished something too." But instead, I celebrated with the team by opening champagne right in the kitchen after closing. "To the chef!" shouted the chefs and waiters as they raised their glasses. Chef, the owner, a successful businesswoman. All I was to my family was a loser, forever in the shadow of the brilliant Christina. Maybe I should have told them the truth a long time ago. But with each year of silence, it became more and more difficult. I'd built my life apart from them, created my own world, where I was valued for my talent and perseverance, not compared to my perfect older sister. And yet sometimes, lying awake after a particularly hard day, I imagined my parents' faces if they found out that their youngest daughter, who is still looking for herself, had actually found herself a long time ago. It's just that none of them bothered to notice it. I was almost to the exit of the banquet hall when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Someone grabbed my elbow. "Christina! Don't you dare leave!" she hissed through clenched teeth, smiling at the guests who were looking curiously in our direction. "We need to talk." "I don't think we have much to talk about," I said, trying to free my hand. "Yes, there is." She tightened her grip. "In the dressing room. Now." I could have said no, could have just left like I'd planned, but part of me wanted this confrontation. I wanted to finally express everything that had been building up inside me for years. The dressing room of the White Rose was a small room with mirrors and rows of coat hooks. Christina pushed me inside and locked the door. Her perfect hair was beginning to disintegrate, red blotches burning on her cheeks. "How dare you!" Her voice shook with rage. "How dare you ruin my evening!" "I didn't do anything, Chris," I replied calmly. "It was the waiter who accidentally gave away my secret." "Accidentally?" She laughed bitterly. "It was no accident. You set the whole thing up. You deliberately invited that waiter to give away your little secret and steal attention from me." The absurdity of the accusation stunned me. "Really? You think I'm that calculating? I didn't even know Marco worked here part-time. He only works for me on weekends." "You!" Christina mocked. "The great chef and businesswoman Melanie Baxter. Why did you hide it if you weren't planning some sort of sneak attack? Why didn't you tell your family?" The dressing room door swung open, and Daniel appeared in the opening, followed by our parents. Their faces showed that they'd heard the screams. "Christina, honey!" Daniel tried to hug his fiancé. "Please calm down. The guests are starting to worry." "Worried?" Christina pushed him away. "Oh, they should be worried. My own sister has just ruined the most important evening of my life. No one ruined anything, Daniel said softly, but there was tension in his voice. It just came out that your sister owns a restaurant. That's wonderful, isn't it? He turned to me. By the way, I was really impressed with Seasons, especially that quail with the raspberry sauce. How do you achieve that balance of sour and sweet? I opened my mouth to answer, but Christina beat me to it. Really, Daniel? You're going to discuss recipes now? I'm just saying it's an amazing accomplishment. He waved his hands. You could be happy for your sister. Be happy? Christina looked at him like he was crazy. She's been jealous of me her whole life. And now that my moment of glory has finally arrived, she's decided to steal it. Her mother, who had been silent until then, finally intervened. Christina, dear, no one is stealing anything. We're just surprised. She turned to me, and I saw a mixture of confusion and resentment in her eyes. Melanie, why didn't you tell us? We're your family. Right, Mom? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. We're family when Christina needs applause, but not when I need support. That's not fair. My mother was outraged. We've always supported you. In what ways? I started listing on my fingers. When I wanted to go to culinary school, you said it was a waste of time. When I told you I was working in a restaurant, you were disappointed. When I tried to talk about my successes, you turned the conversation to Christina's. My father, who always avoided emotional scenes, tried to diffuse the situation. Girls, let's not fight. Tonight is a special night. Yes, Dad, I interrupted him. Christina's special night. Just like every night in our family. That's not fair, Melanie. Dad looked genuinely puzzled. We're proud of both of you. Are you? I couldn't stop myself. Name one accomplishment of mine that you're proud of. One that you've told your colleagues about with as much enthusiasm as you've told them about Christina. His silence was more eloquent than any words. Exactly, I nodded. You didn't even know what I did. Not because I was hiding it, but because you weren't interested. You see? Christina splayed her hands. She's jealous of me. She's always been jealous. I can't help it. That I'm more successful. That my parents are proud of me. It's not about envy, Chris, I said tiredly. It's that there's no room in this family for two successful daughters. There's you, the brilliant, perfect Christina. And there's me, the eternal disappointment, still searching for myself. Daniel, sensing that the situation was getting out of hand, tried to intervene again. Can we get back to the guests? I'm sure we can discuss this later, in a calmer atmosphere. You don't understand. Christina turned to him, tears welling up in her eyes. This was supposed to be my night. Just mine. And it's yours. Daniel stroked her cheek. No one's going to change that. But isn't it nice that your sister has something to be proud of, too? Owning a Michelin-starred restaurant is amazing. So you like her restaurant? Christina took a step back. Maybe you like Melanie more than me. Chris, that's ridiculous. Daniel shook his head. I'm just saying it's okay to be happy for your sister, not to take her success as a threat. So now I'm being paranoid? Christina's voice rose an octave. That's great! That's just great! The mother, seeing that the situation was escalating, tried to calm her eldest daughter. Christina, honey, no one is saying you're wrong. We're just all a little stunned. Melanie, why don't you explain? What is it, Mom? I crossed my arms over my chest. Why didn't I tell you I owned a restaurant? Maybe because every time I tried to talk about my job, you looked at your watch or turned the conversation to Christina. That's not true. Her mother was indignant, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. 27 years, I said quietly. 27 years of hearing that I wasn't good enough. 27 years of trying to earn a little bit of your respect. And when I finally achieved something meaningful, I realized I didn't need your approval anymore. There was a heavy silence in the dressing room. My mother looked at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. Father shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. Daniel looked thoughtful. And Christina looked like she'd been betrayed. If you think I'm going to believe this play, she finally said icily, you're wrong. You were always a good actress, Melanie. Always knew how to evoke pity. Chris, Daniel said warningly. No, let her talk. I looked my sister straight in the eye. Say what you really think, Christina. No filters or pretense. Okay. She took a step forward. I think you've always hated the fact that I'm better than you. That I'm smarter, more successful, prettier. That my parents love me more. And now you're trying to prove that's not true with your little restaurant. Christina! Exclaimed the mother. How can you say such things? Why? Christina shrugged her shoulders. It's the truth. She's always been in my shadow, and it's killing her. I felt a strange calmness. It was as if all the emotions that had been building up over the years had suddenly crystallized into a clear understanding. You know what the saddest part is, Chris? I said quietly. That you actually believe it. You're so fixated on your superiority that you can't imagine that I can be happy and successful on my own, not in comparison to you. I turned to my parents. And you believe it too. You're so used to seeing Christine as an ideal and me as a disappointment that you can't accept the reality that we're both successful in our own ways. Melanie, that's not true, Dad started. But I shook my head. It's exactly like that, Dad. And the funny thing is, for years I believed it too. I believed I wasn't good enough, that my dreams and aspirations weren't worth your attention. But you know what? I squared my shoulders. I built a successful business without your help and support. And I'm proud of it. I'm leaving, Christina suddenly announced. I'm not going to stand here and listen to my sister trying to ruin my party with her psychological problems. She turned to Daniel. Are you coming? Daniel looked uncertain, his gaze darting between Christina and me. Chris, maybe you shouldn't leave your own engagement party. Yeah. I am, she said. Are you coming or staying to marvel at my sister's culinary talents? He sighed, gave me an apologetic look, and followed her. At the door, Christina turned around. Don't worry, sis. I won't tell the guests how you tried to ruin my evening. It will be our little family secret. With those words, she walked out, slamming the door loudly. Daniel, with one last guilty look, followed her out. It was just me and my parents left in the dressing room. Mother stared at the closing door, with an expression of helplessness on her face. Father looked as if he had suddenly aged 10 years. What's going to happen now? Mother muttered. The guests. The engagement party. Really, Mom? I couldn't believe it. After everything that just happened, you care about guests? Melanie, you have to understand, my father said softly but firmly. It's, a shock. We didn't know. You didn't want to know, I corrected him. Big difference. I headed for the door. You're leaving too? I could hear the panic in my mother's voice. I stopped, gripping the doorknob. Yes, Mom. I have to get back to my restaurant. I have a big day tomorrow. Melanie, my father took a step toward me. We need to talk. About all of this. About what you said. I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Uncertainty. Like the ground was shifting out from under my feet, and the world was coming apart at the seams. We'll talk, I agreed. But not tonight. Right now, you have an engagement to save. I walked out of the dressing room, leaving my parents at a loss. On my way out, I could hear the voices of the guests wondering where they'd disappeared to. In the lobby, I ran into the maitre d', who looked at me questioningly. Miss Baxter is away on urgent business, I said. But the festivities continue. Serve hot hors d'oeuvres. He nodded, though I could tell by the look on his face that he didn't believe it. It was raining lightly outside. I stood under the restaurant's canopy, waiting for a cab, and thought about how one casual remark by a waiter had turned my whole life upside down. Shattered the illusions I'd worked so hard to maintain. It brought out the truth I'd been hiding even from myself, the truth about how much it hurt me to be forever in my sister's shadow. But in a strange way, I was relieved, as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying for years had finally fallen from my shoulders. The evening might have ended in disaster for Christine, but for me, it was the beginning of something new. A life without mask, without pretense, a life where I could finally be myself. Every spare minute I had was filled with creating the new seasonal menu, checking invoices, meeting with suppliers. It was my way of not thinking about Christina's engagement disaster. I put my phone on silent mode after discovering 23 missed calls from my parents and a dozen messages from my mother, ranging from angry, "How could you do this to your sister?" to pleading, "Please call, we need to talk." Christina, to my relief, made no attempt to contact me. "Chef, you're getting yourself in trouble," Pierre, my sous chef, remarked when I stayed after closing time for the third day in a row, experimenting with a new dessert. "Maybe you should slow down a little." "I'm fine," I replied automatically, tasting the white chocolate mousse with lavender. "Not enough sourness. Maybe some passion fruit?" Pierre sighed, but didn't argue. My team knew that at times like this, it was best to stay away from advice. Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the incident, as I called the engagement to myself, a new supplier of organic vegetables and herbs arrived at Seasons. I had heard of Clear Dawn Farm from coworkers, but hadn't worked with them directly until now. Melanie Baxter? A 35-year-old man in a simple plaid shirt extended his hand. Lucas Rayner. Thank you for agreeing to meet. He had an open face with the slight tan of a man who spent a lot of time outdoors, and calm gray eyes. His handshake was firm, but not ostentatiously strong. "Let's see what you brought." I got right to the point, not wanting to waste time on small talk. Lucas unloaded several crates of vegetables from the van. Every tomato, every leaf of lettuce, every root vegetable looked like it had just been picked. "We use only organic growing methods," he explained as I checked the quality of the produce. "No pesticides, only natural fertilizers, and a lot of manual labor." I cut into the beets, juicy, with rich color. The tomatoes smelled of sunshine. The greens were crisp and fresh. "Impressive," I admitted, "but your prices are above market." "That's true." Lucas nodded without a trace of embarrassment. "Organic growing requires more labor and yields less, but I can guarantee a steady supply and emergency delivery if necessary. Plus," he smiled, "your customers will feel the difference." There was no arrogance in his confidence, just a quiet knowledge of the value of his labor. That was the payoff. "Let's try a test run," I decided. 1 month. If everything goes well, we'll sign a permanent contract." "Fair enough." Lucas held out his hand, and we shook hands again. "You won't regret it." That afternoon, as I was experimenting with a salad of fresh beets and goat cheese, using the produce Lucas had just delivered, the maitre d' told me I had a visitor. "He didn't make a reservation," Anthony added. "He said it was private." Daniel was sitting at a table by the window in the restaurant. When he saw me, he stood up. "Hi, Melanie. I apologize for the unexpected visit." "Daniel, I was surprised. What are you doing here? I wanted to talk." He looked tired, shadows under his eyes. "Do you mind if I order a coffee?" "It's been a sleepless night." I nodded to Anthony, and he went to get my order. "How's Christina?" I asked, taking a seat across from her. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. "I don't know. We broke up. The engagement is off." "What?" I didn't hide my surprise. "But why?" After that night, he stared out the window, not meeting my gaze. I started to see things differently. Christina. She was always perfect. Perfect job, perfect looks, perfect manners. I had fallen in love with that perfect picture. But that night, I saw a different side. Anthony brought coffee, and Daniel took a sip before continuing. "You know what she said when we left the restaurant? Can you imagine how she's going to use this against me? Now everyone will be comparing my accomplishments to her restaurant. Not a word about her being happy for you or proud. Just fear of losing your best sister status." I was silent, not knowing what to say. "I tried to talk to her," Daniel continued. "I tried to explain that her success doesn't make her less successful because you're successful too. But she was obsessed with the idea that you'd set it up on purpose to outshine her. And the more she talked, the more I realized I didn't know who she really was." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "Don't be," he smiled weakly. It's better to realize it now than after the wedding. I just wanted you to know that it wasn't your fault. I. I'm impressed with what you've created. This restaurant, your career, it's impressive. We talked some more, mostly about neutral topics, and when Daniel left, I returned to the kitchen with a strange sense of devastation. Not that I was happy about Christina and Daniel's breakup, but I wasn't particularly sad either. Rather, I was struck by how easily relationships that seemed perfect could crumble, how quickly the facade crumbles when the truth comes out. 3 days after Daniel's visit, my parents showed up at the restaurant. I saw them through the kitchen glass door. They were sitting at a table in the far corner, looking unaccustomedly uncertain. My mother was nervously fidgeting with her napkin, my father studying the menu with exaggerated attention. "Pierre, take charge," I asked the sous chef. "I need to talk to the guests." As I approached their table, I felt a strange mix of emotions, irritation, fatigue, but also, somewhere deep down, hope. "Mom! Dad!" I stopped next to them. "I didn't expect to see you." "Melanie!" My mother stood up and hugged me. "We've been so worried. You haven't been answering your cell phone." "I've been busy," I replied, not breaking the hug, but not answering it either. "Can you sit down?" My father pointed to a vacant chair. "We'd like to talk." I sat down, feeling strangely formal with my own parents. "How's Christina?" I asked, not knowing where to begin. My parents exchanged glances. "She's doing okay," my mother said carefully. Breaking up with Daniel had been a blow to her. "We didn't come to talk about Christina," the father said, suddenly firm. "We came to apologize." I waited silently for him to continue. "You were right." He looked me straight in the eye. "We didn't pay enough attention to you, didn't support your dreams, didn't notice your accomplishments. We were blind," my mother added, tears welling up in her eyes. "We were so used to seeing you in a certain role that we didn't notice how you grew out of it." Their words should have brought relief, but all I felt was tiredness. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not before?" "Because we didn't see it," my father answered honestly. "We needed that night, that conflict to open our eyes. And now what?" I looked at them. "Do you expect me to just say it's okay and we start over?" Dash. "No." My mother shook her head. "We realize that earning your forgiveness and trust won't be easy. We just want a chance to get to know you, the real you." I showed them around the restaurant, walked them through the kitchen, introduced the team. My parents looked at everything with genuine interest and wonder, as if it was the first time they had seen me in my natural environment. After the tour, we had dinner. I asked Pierre to prepare the best dishes on the menu for them. As I watched my father enthusiastically sampling the duck confit with cherry sauce, and my mother closing her eyes in pleasure as she tasted the lavender crème brûlée, I felt a strange sadness. So many years lost, so many moments we could have shared. "It's incredible, Melanie," Dad said when the dessert was finished. "We are so proud of you." "Thank you," I replied. And for the first time in a long time, those words didn't seem empty. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about Lucas a lot. He brought groceries twice a week, and each time we talked longer and longer, first about vegetables and how to cook them, then about the philosophy of organic farming, then just about life. I caught myself waiting for him to arrive, and it was frightening. "Melanie," he said one day, when we were discussing a new batch of spring herbs, "why don't we have dinner together? Not here." He glanced around my restaurant. "Somewhere where you won't be the chef, but just yourself." I froze. My last serious relationship had been 3 years ago, and it hadn't ended well. Work always came first, and the man I was dating couldn't accept that. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," I said. "You're the supplier, I'm the customer. I can stop being your supplier if that's the only problem." He had a slight smile in his voice. "No, your vegetables are too good." I couldn't resist smiling back. "Just let me think about it, okay?" He nodded without pressure, and I was grateful for that. And then the thing I'd been dreading since the restaurant opened happened. Richard Stevens, one of the city's most influential restaurant critics, published a review of Seasons. I read it early one morning, sitting in an empty restaurant with a cup of coffee. The cuisine at Seasons demonstrates technical skill and creativity, Stevens wrote. The duck confit is flawless, as are the desserts. However, the establishment lacks consistency. Service is uneven, and some dishes show a lack of restraint in flavor combinations. One wonders if young chef Melanie Baxter has enough management experience to provide the consistent quality needed for a restaurant of this caliber. I reread those lines over and over again, feeling panic rising inside. One bad review could scare away customers, reduce sales, jeopardize everything I had worked so hard to build. My sister's voice rang in my head. You were always not good enough. My mother's voice. Why don't you go into something a little more reliable? Father's voice. Christina at your age is already... I clenched my fists, feeling my nails dig into my palms. Two possibilities stood before me. Back down, admit that the critic was right, that I really wasn't experienced enough. Or accept the challenge, use the criticism as an incentive to grow and improve. There was a knock at the door. It was Lucas with an unscheduled delivery of rare spring mushrooms that he knew I had long been looking for a new dish. Seeing my face, he immediately knew something was wrong. Bad news? He asked, nodding at the open newspaper. Not the best. I showed him the article. Lucas read it carefully, then looked up. What are you going to do? There was no judgment or doubt about my abilities in that simple question. Just genuine interest and confidence that I would find a solution. And it was at that moment that I realized I wouldn't back down. Not after everything I'd been through. Not after finally stepping out of my sister's shadow and asserting myself. This review is not a judgment, but an opportunity to be better. 6 months flew by like a day. After the publication of that scathing article by Richard Stevens, I gathered the entire Seasons team and read them the review from beginning to end, without missing a word. It's not the end of the world, I said when I saw their upset faces. It's an opportunity to get better. Instead of falling into despair or ignoring the criticism, we methodically worked through each point. I hired an experienced service consultant who completely overhauled the service system. Pierre and I overhauled every dish on the menu, simplifying some complex combinations and increasing the focus on ingredient quality. I even sent several chefs on internships with renowned chefs so they could bring in new techniques and ideas. Lucas proved to be an unexpectedly valuable ally in this transformation. His farm became our main supplier, and gradually, our professional relationship grew into something more. We began dating, cautiously at first, like two people who value their independence too much to risk it rashly. Our first dates were strange. I was as nervous as a teenager, and he waited patiently for me to overcome my barriers. Ciao. You don't have to open up right away, he said one evening, as we strolled along the promenade after dinner at a small Italian restaurant. We have time. It was this confidence he had that we had a future that frightened and attracted me at the same time. After all the years I'd spent in my sister's shadow, after all the attempts to prove my worth, it was strange to meet a man who simply accepted me for who I was. On my first anniversary of owning the restaurant, I decided to have a special night. Not just a dinner, but a real celebration that would reflect the journey I had traveled. We created a special menu that included both improved versions of the original dishes and brand new creations. I invited everyone, the team and their families, the regulars, even Richard Stevens, who, to my surprise, agreed to come. My parents were among the first to arrive, carrying a bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers, which I didn't remember ever mentioning to them. Grandma Doris always said you loved lilies, Mom explained, noticing my surprise. She told me how you used to grow them together in her garden. That little fact, the fact that they remembered something so personal, touched me more than I'd expected. Over the past few months, our relationship has slowly but surely rebounded. We started with awkward Sunday dinners, moved on to more regular get-togethers, and gradually I noticed that they were really making an effort to get to know me again. My father started reading cooking magazines to understand my world. My mother stopped comparing me to Christina. Speaking of Christina, she wasn't on the guest list. After the engagement broke up, she took a leave of absence and went traveling, first in Europe, then Southeast Asia. Her parents said she was looking for herself, and the irony of that phrase didn't escape me. Now it was Christina who was looking for herself, and I was firmly on my own path. The evening was in full swing. The guests were enjoying the fifth course of the tasting menu when I spotted her. Christina stood at the entrance, looking around the room uncertainly. She looked different, tanned, with a short haircut instead of her usual long curls, wearing a simple black dress instead of the designer outfits she usually wore. Our gazes met across the hall, and after a second's hesitation, I made my way toward her. "Hi," she said as I approached. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything?" "No," I replied, surprised at my own calmness. "I'm glad you came. My mom told me about the party." Christina fixed her hair nervously. "I only got back yesterday and I thought I should come. If you don't mind." "I don't mind." I pointed to the bar. "Would you like a drink?" We sat at the bar, sipping champagne and watching the guests. The awkward silence gradually turned into careful conversation about neutral topics: her travels, my new dishes, the weather. "I saw Stephen's new review," she finally said. "He writes that you're a symbol of the city's culinary renaissance. Impressive." "Thanks," I smiled. "But I think he's exaggerating a little." "I don't think so." Christina shook her head. "Judging by the way your guests react to the food, he's right." She took a sip of champagne, then looked me straight in the eye. "I need to apologize, Mel. For everything. For the way I treated you. For saying terrible things. For being such a bitch." I almost choked on my champagne in surprise. Christina had never, not once in her life, apologized to me. "The trip. It changed a lot of things," she continued, staring into her glass. "When you're alone in a foreign country, where no one knows who you are, no one knows your accomplishments or status, you begin to realize that none of that matters as much as you thought it did." She looked up. "You know what I realized? I was always afraid that if I wasn't the best, the most successful, the brightest, I'd disappear. I'd be invisible, as if my worth was only measured by comparison to others." "I know that feeling," I said quietly. "Of course you do," Christina grinned bitterly. "I've been making you feel that way for years, always comparing you, always emphasizing your accomplishments. I felt like your successes somehow diminished mine, that we were competing for a limited amount of, I don't know, love, recognition. That sounds so stupid right now." "It's not stupid," I shook my head. "Just human. Breaking up with Daniel," Christina sighed, "was a blow. But honestly, he was right. I was obsessed with the image of the perfect Christina Baxter. I myself didn't know who I was without that image. We talked for a long time, not as rival sisters, but as two grown women admitting their mistakes and trying to find a way to reconcile. It wasn't the dramatic reunion from the movies, with hugs and tears. Rather, a quiet acceptance that we had both changed, and perhaps we could now build something new. Near the end of the evening, another unexpected event occurred. A representative from the city's Chamber of Commerce stepped up to a small stage set up in the corner of the room and announced that Seasons was receiving the annual Best Young Business Award. I didn't realize I'd been nominated. It turned out to be my team's initiative. When I went up on stage to receive my award, a glass statuette in the shape of a rising sun, I saw my parents applauding with undisguised pride. Christina raising a glass in my honor, Lucas, whose eyes shone with warmth and respect, and my entire team, the people who believed in me and worked side by side to create what Seasons has become. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. "This award belongs not only to me, but to everyone who believed in me, even when I myself doubted." After the official part, the celebration continued. I went from table to table, chatting with the guests, accepting congratulations. Christina left early, but before she left, we agreed to meet on the weekend. just to have lunch and talk. My parents didn't stay until the end either, but their hugs before they left were warmer and more sincere than ever. Lucas stayed late, helping the team clean up after the last guests had left. "A successful evening," he said, folding the tablecloths. "More than successful." I felt pleasantly tired. "Thanks for being there for me." He smiled, that special smile that was just for me. "I'm always here for you, you know that." And I knew it. Over the months, he had become a constant in my life. Not an exciting and all-consuming passion, but a reliable, calm presence. A man who saw the real me and loved that version of me, not some perfect image. Our relationship progressed slowly, cautiously. We both knew these things couldn't be rushed. But that night, as he helped me close the restaurant, I realized I was ready to take the next step. "Are you staying tonight?" I asked as we walked outside and I locked the door. Lucas took my hand, intertwining our fingers. "If you want to." "I do." I felt absolutely certain of my choice for the first time in a long time. A week later, exactly 1 year and 2 weeks after that memorable night at Christina's engagement party, I stood in the Seasons kitchen after closing time. The crew was finishing cleaning up, chatting and joking after a successful evening. Pierre was experimenting with a new sauce for tomorrow's special menu. The two new interns, very young girls from culinary school, watched his manipulations with admiration, asking questions that he patiently answered. I watched this scene and thought about the path that brought me here, about the little girl who always felt like she wasn't good enough compared to her brilliant older sister, about the teenager who hid her dreams because she was afraid of ridicule, about a young woman who built her life in the shadows, hiding from her own family. What changed? I changed. Not in an instant, but gradually, step by step. Every time I chose to believe in myself instead of believing other people's doubts. Every time I took a risk and tried something new instead of staying in my comfort zone. Every time I stood up for my boundaries instead of letting others violate them. I now had a new relationship with my parents. Not perfect, but more honest and open. A new relationship with my sister, still fragile, but with the potential to grow into something real. A new relationship with Lucas, calm, respectful, based on mutual admiration rather than dependency. And most importantly, a new relationship with myself. I no longer measured my worth by comparing myself to others. No longer sought constant validation of my worth in external recognition. I was no longer dependent on other people's expectations and evaluations. "Chef, try this." Pierre handed me a spoonful of the new sauce. "Do you think it's acidic enough?" I tasted it. A perfect balance of sweetness and sourness, with a slight spicy note on the finish. "Gorgeous," I praised sincerely. "Just add a little fresh thyme at the end." He nodded, taking the advice without offense. That's what we've built here. A team of professionals who are confident enough to take criticism and learn from each other. When everyone had left, I walked around the empty restaurant one more time. I ran my hand over the smooth countertops, the polished stove, the walls that we had recently repainted in a warm peach hue. It was all created with my hands, my energy, my vision. Not to prove anything to my sister or my parents, but because it was what I loved and knew how to do. I was no longer living in the shadows, not my sister's, not my own fears. I was creating my own light. And in that light, there was room for everyone who wanted to share it. My family, with their imperfections and complicated history. Lucas, with his quiet confidence and groundedness. My team, with their talents and aspirations. And myself, not perfect, but real. Turning off the lights and locking the restaurant door, I smiled at my reflection in the glass. Tomorrow would be a new day, new challenges, new opportunities for growth. And I was ready for them all.
Любі глядачі, дякую вам за перегляд, ставте лайки та підписуйтесь на канал. Також напишіть в коментарях, чи погоджуєтесь ви з Дженніфер, чи вона мала розказати все матері, чи ні, чи мала все розказати своєму коханцю щодо свого чоловіка, чи ні. І також прокоментуйте, чи вам сподобалось це відео.